This is the Misdirected Mark Podcast, a podcast about gaming, game mastering, and entertaining you, our listeners. We are explicit, you have been warned, and I'd like to thank Mike Willard for letting us use his music on our show. Now let's pick up those mics and get on with this thing.
Chris, holy cow, you will not believe what's been going on. You remember when we were on the show last week and we said goodnight and I got all dusty? And I must have passed out because I woke up in the living room and the show was gone. But Phil was there, right? And he said, hey, it's been a week and they need you. And he handed me a coffee.
Oh, Bob, come here, old man. I need to give you a hug.
Oh, this is good.
Hey, Phil, you said next week we should do a show, yeah? Tell me this is the show. This is it. This is the opening of that show.
If I tell you that it is, it won't happen.
Well, I guess I should start then. And welcome to the 373rd episode of the Misdirected Mark Podcast. Tonight we are talking about the end of your games. The Endgame, if you will. But first, my name is Chris.
My name is Phil.
And I'm Old Man Logan.
Old man Logan.
Well.
Well,
Here we are.
We are here.
we're back.
Not even dusty.
Not even dusty anymore.
So-
Bob's a little dusty.
Well,
He's pretty old.
All we can do is take him out back and beat him with the...
hey,
We're not. No, we're not. First we can't set him on fire. Then we can't sell his soul.
I mean, I refuse to have the dust in my house. I'm going to have to beat
Can
him
we
with the
vacuum
rag,
him?
Beat him with the rag.
No, you could
the
vacuum
rug
it. It's
cleaner.
kind of like a massage.
Yeah, it's fair.
vacuum him.
It's a weird amount of suction. Anyways,
Hey.
let us move on to one thing.
One thing.
So, Bob, tell me about your one thing.
So we played Forbidden Lands again
Oh,
on
we
Sunday,
did.
and that game is so good. We ran into a ghost, and it was a frightening experience.
It was not a friendly ghost.
It was not a friendly ghost. His name was not Casper.
I was going to say.
And we started getting beat up, and we had to improvise some fire because someone realized that they knew some lore that this ghost could only be hurt by fire and magic. And so...
Not rock salt?
not rock salt, nope. So, yeah, it was a harrowing experience. But, yeah, we're having a good time with it. It's a clever game.
It's still really interesting. Like,
Mhm.
not much has actually happened. Like, it's not chewing through, like, epic storylines. Like, they went into the forest to help the midwife of the town go get some sap from the Ents. And
That's not
then
what you think.
they ran into this ghost on the way home, and
Yep.
it was fairly terrifying.
Yeah.
And then they made a deal to sell some ale in a
Sell
neighboring
some
town
ale.
to raise some more money.
All right, I have a question.
Yep.
What makes it fun?
I don't.
You know, it's a weird mix of old school kind of feel with an interesting setting. All right, so we haven't really told a story yet, but the story we're telling so far is interesting. The characters that we got are compelling, and the components of the crunchy bits are all pieces that like you hand wave for a lot of other games.
Uh-huh.
Like, oh, we're going to set up camp. Well, we got to make a roll to set up camp to
Uh-huh.
make sure that everything goes well.
And if it doesn't, there's actually something.
There's
like-
consequences.
yeah, there's consequences, and there's
Yeah.
like actually interesting mechanics for when that doesn't work.
It's for whatever reason with the four of us that are playing, it's hitting a chord.
It has this really small scale, and the game's really playable, but it makes things, again, like Bob said, it makes things that we normally would hand wave. It makes them important, but it also doesn't make them cumbersome or annoying.
Yeah.
Like travel is actually interesting.
Which
and-
is fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you actually advance pretty well in the game. There's like a series of questions you answer at the end of the game that give, like, each question you answer yes to, you get experience points for. So while they haven't done a lot, like they've picked up a bunch of feats, talents they're called, that are starting to make things like travel a lot easier. Like they've picked up hunting skills and quartermaster skills. and
Almost
things.
like they're getting experience as they're traveling around.
Yeah.
And what they're working towards right now is like they're working towards having enough money because they realize like they want to go raid this
Keep-
ruin.
Yeah, ruin.
Yeah, but like Sean doesn't have armor, and Sean's like, I probably need armor, and
So they're formulating a plan so they can actually enact their
Yep.
take so they can go about achieving their goal.
Yeah, and it's just per session. Like sometimes like a session is just like they did a side quest.
Yeah,
Because they needed money.
Yeah, and they came back to town.
And when you level up stuff with experience, like when you learn a new skill, all right, or you learn a new talent, you're not just like I spend XP and I have this now. No, you have to actually do the thing. Like if I wanted the scouting skill, all right, I would roll the attribute that goes with the scouting skill without having the scouting skill, and you have to do that and succeed at least once during the session before you can spend the XP to actually get level 1 in that skill.
That makes sense.
And same thing similarly with talents. Like you have to do some stuff. You have to like go find a person to teach you how to do the thing.
There's some narrative.
So there's narrative stuff. So we spent some time going out with this person from the town to go and do the thing. And so
yeah, you went out with the woodsman like who taught you quartermastering and like or taught you how to make camp and things like that.
Yeah.
So and you don't have to roll if you do that. So if you get somebody to teach it to you.
Yep.
So yeah, it's it's fun. Like I don't know, it's really weird. I wish I could explain it. It just like it works.
Yeah.
And it's all random encounters, and there's a lot of. It's very OSR. Like we don't know what's going to happen until you get to an adventure site. The adventure sites are actually like little modules.
Yeah.
But in the in between, like we're just like. I don't know, you just like, cool, we're going to go up north and, we're going to escort this woman into the forest. Let's find out. I see the chat room's having fun.
Yeah, I had a good giggle about that myself.
Yeah. So cool, yeah.
So what about you, Phil? What's your one thing?
Things from the Flood. So I had been gearing up to run my John Wick game and wasn't able to run it because, I had brought the kids back up, what was it, the beginning of the month. And I was going to run it this coming weekend, but I wound up, I'm taking a trip to Denver. So I was like, oh yeah, I can't, I'm not going to be able to run. So it's kind of looking kind of like not good for this game, right? Like 2 failed starts is usually a bad sign for a game. But all of a sudden we get a Slack message from Tony who's like, I think I'm ready to come back.
Kid 2 easier than Kid 1.
Yeah.
Kid 2 apparently is doing okay. So I was like, cool, we can't play this coming weekend. We can play on the 28th. And I'm like, so do we want to play a spacer game, or with Tony back, are we ready to just do Things from the Flood? So we all agreed it's Things from the Flood. And so this weekend I read the storybook, the art book, Things from the Flood, which was excellent. It's very interesting. I love that artist. Like I love all of his work. And I don't know if you ever saw the other book, the actual Tales from the Loop book, but it's a collection of art pieces, but he has these like little quarter-page stories that go with them.
That's cool.
So like there's like a little story that goes with like one art piece or a couple art pieces in a row. And that's what Things from the Flood is. It's the second of 3 books he's done so far. And this one is like all about the 90s.
Oh, nice.
And it changes everything about Tales from the Loop. Which is really interesting because we're going to bring back
your characters.
Yeah, we're going to do a session 0, bring back our characters and talk about how they translate into their teen playbook, like their teen character classes and all that. Like very exciting. But I read the storybook. That's the thing. That's my Things from the Flood this week. So yeah, and you took a road trip. You went along the southern part of New York State to the 3rd or 4th largest city. It's one of the larger cities, and it's also one of the university centers in the State University of New York system.
Yeah, Binghamton. For a thing called Luma. So Luma is an outdoor evening light festival that takes 2 days on Friday and Saturday evening. What they do is they have these giant projectors, and they project animated art presentations on the side of buildings using the architecture as part of the presentation. So they mix art and architecture together. They have other displays too, but there are 6 of them out on the streets using buildings. There were some people who could play video games that were being projected on the side of buildings, but there were some really cool storytelling things that were happening on the side of buildings. And it's a giant outdoor festival. There are like like 10 or 20,000 people were there,
Cool.
just wandering around at night. On the
Weather was
streets.
nice, right?
The weather was gorgeous. It was beautiful outside. There were some really cool displays inside too. There was this one that was like a 15-foot tall polygonal head-looking thing that had projected on it 4 faces, essentially, that went through this whole 12-minute loop of different elements and sequences and animations. It was really beautiful. Maybe I'll post it. I have it. So
The picture's really cool.
Which one?
You sent the one video.
Did I send the one video?
Yep.
Yeah, you put it on Slack. It's
Yeah, that one was really neat. They also had a group there called Feckled Sky. They were on America's Got Talent. They're a dance troupe, but they do this thing where they perform with behind a chiffon screen, essentially, that they project their presentation on. So
Neat.
they dance within the presentation to tell a story.
cool.
That was it was really interesting. It was they even had like behind it, like you couldn't see it, but it was like a black lift that would actually lift them up and down too.
Neat.
So there were really cool things going on with that. It was actually the neatest thing I probably saw all weekend. It was called The Challenge. It's a story about a hero who can manipulate elements and goes around and does battle with a number of different elemental people to take the elements and then go and unlock this pyramid to get to the center of creation.
That's
Cool.
that's pretty awesome.
It was pretty awesome. I especially like the part where they were inside the pyramid. This character's inside the pyramid, because they did the thing where like the pyramid would flip on the inside, so it looked like they were moving with the thing flipping around.
No,
like,
neat.
into
Yeah.
dimensions. It was really cool. It's very impressive. So if you're in the New York area and you get a chance to go, it's the 5th year they've done it. This is not it's not a unique thing. Like they've been doing stuff like this in France. I think it started years and years ago, like decades ago.
So for rough math, if you are in the Buffalo area, it's like a 3.5 to 4 hour drive to get there. If you're in the New York City area, that's like a 2 to 3 hour drive if you go along 17. If you were, I don't remember if it has its own airport. So the next biggest city directly north of it is Syracuse.
It's about an hour away.
Yeah, so if you're Schmidian wanted to go, you would take the 90 right to Syracuse and then drop south.
Yep, it's actually not that hard of a drive.
No, it's actually we go through. I think Bob does too. Go through Binghamton in order to get to Metatopia. Because you go through Binghamton and then you continue south through Binghamton. You continue south east through Binghamton into Scranton.
So that's what I did.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really wonderful. I'm gonna go back next year.
I'm going to Casa Bonita next week.
Casa Bonita.
Yeah.
Because you're
Casa Bonita,
Just watch the
Casa
chat room blow
Bonita.
up in a second.
No.
In 5, 4, 3, 2,
Just
1.
takes a second. All right, let's do an announcement. So we have one singular announcement.
One singular
sensation.
announcement.
One of my favorite musicals, actually.
A
A chorus line for anybody who's wondering.
Yep.
Here's just a joke about musicals and other things. Anyways, let's move on from that before I get myself into trouble. Announcements. So the FM Gamers, that's the streaming show that I am going to be the game master, dungeon master on, at least for the first story, starts on September 30th. It'll be a Monday evenings. Every other Monday from 7 to 9 p.m. will be the stream. And we're playing, the first game we are playing is a D&D hack, a 5th edition D&D hack called Spelljammed. I imagine that there will be, after the first story arc we play, that somebody else will pick up the reins and run something else that might not be D&D. So that's what's going on there. We have 2 of our cast members already cast. We're figuring out who our 3rd cast member is on Monday, the 16th. We're having like our
Ceremonial knife fight.
Yeah, pretty much. We're having our shortlist show up so that they can run their auditions with us, and the cast can see who they are most comfortable with.
Be more funny.
It's just do we all work? Which person works best with us? This show should be fun. We have a producer that is actually sitting on site with us because we're playing here in this room, and that producer will be running like different camera views and angles, and like we'll have some animations that open up the show and things like that too. So it'll be well produced, supposedly. We'll see. That's the goal anyway. I've already seen some of the stuff. It looks pretty neat.
Cool.
All right, let's move on then to our feature segment, The Garage. where we are going to do this.
Access granted.
So is everybody still there? Like, I don't have a glove.
Yeah, don't.
So it's not like I have a glove that can actually like snap away half the universe of people. So when we started talking about endgames last week, we thought it was a very compelling discussion, and we want to do a whole show about it. So let's talk about deliberate ways that campaigns end. This is in contrast to campaigns fading out or a game being dropped. So let's get into that idea right there. We're going to talk about mostly tabletop role-playing games, but we might drift into other things.
We're definitely going to drift into other games. I wrote that at the top of the thing, and then by the time we got into the middle of the notes, I was like, oh, no, we're talking about board games. We're going to talk about all sorts of things.
Yeah. So, Phil, what is an endgame?
Right? So the traditional
Wait,
definition.
do you want your definition? Do you want your definition?
Ooh, drop the definition.
Oh, okay. I was going to just do it, but...
Behold! You are in the presence of Definition Panda.
Right. The definition of endgame, which I think actually is pretty solid, is the final stage of a game such as chess or bridge where a few pieces or cards remain. And for tabletop RPGs, we're talking about the final stage of a game where just a few plot lines remain. And in the endgame of a tabletop RPG, we often usually have like some sort of climactic battle that resolves most of the main conflict, and we start like we're in that. The end game is often like overlaps with the denouement, right? Like because we've kind of solved everything, and we're now starting to kind of wind down our conflicts and issues.
It's an interesting thought because I think the denouement is part of the end game.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? Yeah. I think the climactic battle signals that we're about to head in, like either. And there's no hard definition for this, right? Either the end of the climactic battle signals the beginning of the end game, or the end game signals the climactic battle signals the beginning of the end game.
Or whatever the twist is that drives you towards that.
Yeah,
that climactic moment.
Yeah, I don't think there's a hard line that's like suddenly you're in the end game.
There isn't a hard line as far as like storytelling is concerned.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Like sometimes it just happens.
Right.
But
I think the best way to denote it is that storylines start wrapping up. Right? Like we start resolving stuff, not extending things.
Yeah. I mean, somebody mentioned the end game is the cuddle. No, the end game is not. It's the cuddle is part of the end game, but it's a little bit bigger than that.
Yeah, I think
it's really the last vigorous push before the cuddle. Also.
Okay.
I think I nailed it right in there.
So many things I want to say. So many.
Well,
so it's the O face, and
that's part of it, I would imagine.
Yes.
Right?
Okay. Very good. The oh god.
We're getting there. We're close.
So next time, just shout out. This is the end game, right? Like, just...
maybe not snap.
Well, don't snap. Just
it's better than going. I don't feel so good.
Right. Okay. That's not the end game. That's Infinity War. The end game, right?
Yeah.
You can say I am Iron Man. Like you totally like that's. You can totally say that.
I don't think I could pull that up.
Anyway. Okay.
I mean, essentially.
All right. Well, I gotta wrap this.
No, hold on.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second, because Bob just talked about the snap.
Sure.
Can we talk about this without spoiling anything? I think.
Are we far enough out? The DVD is out.
I mean, the snap is a thing. Like people.
Well, that's
Infinity War in the first movie. So
remember how I mentioned the twist? There's the twist that leads into the end game. That whole movie is the end game.
But I'm going to argue that Infinity War is only the beginning of that twist because it keeps going. Like the real end game of Endgame is at the mansion. Like I don't want to get into this in too detail. Like, but because there's a whole bunch of plot line that happens.
So here's the strange thing: the end game of the movie is that, but the snap is the signal for the end game of the 22 series movies.
That's fair.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Which goes to show that that's fractal.
Yeah.
This idea.
Yep. Yeah. But I do want to focus on, because we're going to talk about actually ending campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
So we are talking about things that when we move from movies to RPGs, we are talking about the event that kind of signals like, hey, we're done playing this game.
Mm-hmm.
Like we defeated the dragon under the Airy Peaks.
Yeah.
Like this game is ending.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's have some resolution. What you call it? Glenn's mom, Marianne's mom, is saved from the loop.
Yeah.
Right. We've resolved that big story.
Yep.
Like that's the big climactic piece, and then all that's left is to start tying things off.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So that's what we're going for role playing games. And like I said, when we get into board games and the other things, we're going to talk about some as examples. They have some. They definitely have. Many games have specific end game rules.
Yeah, and we won't use Endgame as our example.
Yeah.
Because we could use a lot of Endgame examples.
Right.
Because there's a lot of them in there.
Right, and we do talk about fractal things, right? So there is an end game to a one-shot, but it's different from a campaign, right? So in a one-shot, you're just resolving the shit that happened, like, since you started the story.
Yeah.
Right? Like, which is a little less dramatic because it's the denouement to that story.
Well, because it doesn't have the build-up.
Exactly.
It doesn't have as much narrative weight.
Right.
That's usually the term that I prefer to use.
Yeah, and in campaigns, we have so much narrative weight if we've played for a while, right? Because we've generated different arcs. We've generated character arcs, we've generated story arcs, we have meaningful NPCs that we want to have final resolution with, all of those things.
And if you've done it all well, then it feels really good.
Yeah.
If you haven't done it really well, then you just don't really care.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So that's Endgame.
All right,
that's what we mean by it.
Well, we should probably talk about how they work then, right?
Yeah.
So it needs to be triggered in some way, shape, or form, which is why I mentioned that, because that actually does trigger that. And we also need to know that the game is transitioning from the phase it is into the end game.
Yep.
So there are essentially two ways that this is done.
Yep. For RPGs.
Two broad categories for RPGs.
Very broad.
One is narrative and one is mechanically.
Yep.
So narratively, the game is changing to the end game. Like we just do this narratively. So like if you're using a serialized story structure and you're using arcs, there's usually some sort of campaign arc that reaches the climax. For instance, you come back to the Airy Peaks and pretty much everything is different, and really there's not much left to do except kill a dragon.
Yep.
Find and kill a dragon.
Yep.
That's kind of the what's, if I remember correctly, when we played the Airy Peaks campaign, you came back to the peaks and everything was very different.
Yeah.
And that was what signaled sort of like we were moving to the end game.
Yep.
Things were not the same.
Things were escalating as well. Like
yes.
the threat was escalating. Like we knew we were being ushered towards the climactic battle.
There were earthquakes.
Yeah.
Yep.
The ground was starting to crack. There weren't as many adventurers around.
Exactly. The town people were nervous.
Yeah. Which is completely different.
Yes, because they were unfazed by all the other shit going on in their town.
So that is a bunch of narrative triggers that I utilized, or narrative instances that I utilized to show that the end game was approaching.
Yep, which is exactly, and we all understood that, right? So like we all picked up on those things and realized like, oh, there's been a tonal shift in the game. We're heading into this end game.
Which is important to note because tonally shifting the game is a way to indicate that is happening. We talked about
we also talked about it in a meta way as well, right? Like we kind of knew, like we had talked about, like, well, when we restart the game, like when you guys come back from the battle that you were in,
we're gonna move this right towards the end.
Yeah.
We're done with the middle.
Yeah. Exactly.
So but that tonal shift, that's an indicator. That is, we talk about ways to indicate narratively the end game is coming. Like you tonally shift, you raise the stakes.
Yep.
You have a twist that changes things. Really, it's something that changes the status quo in a lot of ways. In video games, this is a boss fight.
The music changes.
The music can change.
Right? Sometimes if it's a side scroller, sometimes like something changes like big on the screen, right? To indicate like we're heading into the boss fight. So while there's mechanics used in defeating the boss, right? Like one could be like, well, if we're fighting the dragon in Dungeon World, then it's a mechanical trigger to the end game. The mechanics of the game aren't what we're talking about for triggering the end. Like we're talking about very specific mechanics, and you're going to talk about that in just a second, that are part of the game that signify the end game is coming.
Yes. So if we're going to talk about mechanics now,
please do.
There's some mechanism within the rules of the game that determines when the end of the game will start.
Yep. So we got a couple.
Yeah. Why don't you give me the first one?
The first one's a countdown, right? A resource or other timer may count down, and when it runs out, the end game is triggered.
Yeah, it's very popular in board games.
Mm-hmm.
A turn limit, also very popular in board games. There's a fixed number of turns that might need to pass, and then the end game begins.
Right.
It also happens in some role playing games.
We're going to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
The opposite of the countdown is the accumulation, right? A resource or other timer may count up, and when it reaches critical mass, we've reached the end game.
For instance, there could be some games that have, like, when you reach a certain level with your characters, the end game occurs.
Wait till we get to the examples.
And then a triggered event. So an event is triggered throughout the game that once it occurs, the end game begins.
Yep.
Which we'll talk about that too in a little bit, because we have
Very
examples
soon.
for all this stuff.
We do.
So now let's talk about different games that use them, right?
Yeah.
D&D's one. Actually uses both, in my opinion. One
Good.
is we use it just kind of ourselves, like the narrative idea. So the end game is determined by the group, and that's usually the end of a campaign arc of some sort.
Yep. That makes complete sense.
Mm-hmm. And then this is not implicit. This is not explicit. It is implied, implicit. The end of level arcs or tiers of play imply that the end of a campaign or story arc is coming or should be there, and those are really good places to wrap up campaigns. So at level 4, at level 9, or 10.
Wow, you can end a campaign at level 4? I guess.
You could. That'd be a very short story arc.
Sure.
Yeah.
That'd be about people saving their town or a very small.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like that.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna get there pretty quick.
Yep.
Level 10 is another level. Because,
Sure.
And level 16 is around there too, because then level 17 through 20 is epic tier.
Right.
Or tier 4, I should say, I guess. So those are implied places to end stories.
Gotcha. Scum and Villainy has a mechanical trigger event.
Mm-hmm.
So when a crew integrates itself with a faction, earning a +3 status, that faction treats the crew as trusted allies. And to quote from the book, at this point, offers the players 3 jobs in sequence that builds up to a climactic finish. The key mission will determine the outcome of the sector. Right?
It's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, so that's a triggering event.
I assume we're going to be playing our Scum and Villainy game until that happens.
Cool.
I mean, the crew is sort of driving towards that. I've sort of set it up to let them push towards that, based on the characters that they were interested in to begin with.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Ticket to Ride. Let's talk about a board game real quick.
Yeah.
So this is mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
There's a triggering event when the game is going to end, which is when a player has 2 or less trains left in their supply. They have a supply of trains, usually like 43, I think it is. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. And then everybody gets one final turn, and then you score.
I screwed Dante and won a game of Ticket to Ride this weekend doing that.
Yeah.
I had a good run where I went 3 turns picking tickets and like got 2 to 3 tickets per turn. And then on the 4th time I tried it, there was like nothing but garbage. So I took like the 8-point ticket. I was like, all right, I guess I can burn 8 points. I had 9 trains. There was no way I could build out to where any of these tickets were. So I was like, how fast can I burn these 9 trains?
Yeah.
And I did, and I caught him while he had like 2 unfinished tickets.
That's a game.
And
that's a way to play that game.
And beating him is not easy. So
Ticket to Ride?
I reveled in the fact that I kicked his ass in Ticket to Ride.
Just stomp on your son.
You know what? For the number of times that kid has pounded me into the ground in board games and video games, felt really good.
That's fair. It's totally fair.
Yep. So Ticket to Ride. In fact, in the app, it makes a little bell ring.
Oh, when you finish
the first player who gets to 2, it goes ding ding, and it tells you it's the last turn.
You know, I should know that because I have that app and I played it a ton of times. So I always put the sound off. So
it can be annoying because it makes like little choo choo sounds all through the game.
Swords Without Master is another game.
Oh, you skipped one. Damn the Man Save the Music has a turn limit. It is a mechanical turn limit. There are 3 acts. Each player gets 1 spotlight scene per act. That's it. You do Act 1, Act 2, and then Act 3 is the resolution of the story. That's a resource. Yep.
The scenes are resources at that point.
Yep.
That's a turn limit, right? Yeah.
It's turn limit. Everybody gets a turn.
If I may, there's a spiffy dice game called Relic Hunters that has 2 different countdown clocks.
Yeah. I mean, if we ever see it in publication in some way, shape, or form.
Someday.
Someday your game will be published. Someday.
Someday.
What are those 2? There's tokens.
There's the treasure pile and the relic deck.
And the relic deck, yeah.
Yeah, when either one of those runs out,
you're done.
That's it. Game over.
I mentioned Swords Without Master before, jumping over Damn the Man Save the Music. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Mechanically, so it's about accumulating these motifs.
Yep.
And when all three motifs are full, the end game is triggered, and then there's an interesting end game that occurs after that.
Yep, there's a set of rules where the players narrate themselves out of the game by reincorporating themselves.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about the Quiet Year.
Yeah, the Quiet Year has a trigger event. There's a card in the winter called the Frost Shepherds Arrive, and that's it. The game ends, and you randomly shuffle it into the winter part of the deck.
For the Queen, we just played that on the show,
Mm-hmm.
so everybody kind of knows how that works. There's a triggering event. The drawing of the card, the Queen is under attack, ends the game. Very abruptly.
Very much so.
Very abruptly.
Yep. The last one I wanted to do was Star-Crossed has actually two different trigger events, or two different mechanical events. There's a trigger event. If the tower falls during play, you move immediately to the end game and resolve what happens. But in case the tower doesn't fall, there's a turn limit. There's a finite number of scenes that you go through, and if you go through all the scenes and the tower doesn't fall, there's a different kind of outcome. So, which is good, right? Because predicating your game on the fact that the tower is going to fall,
Yeah.
you actually have to think, what if it doesn't?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So very nice design, Alex. Two mechanical triggers.
So we should probably break it down now.
Break it down.
It's weird that I am breaking it down, at least to begin with. So, taking all of those things we just talked about into account, how does it come together? I mean, there's got to be a part of the game that takes place before the game ends.
Yep. And then there's a trigger.
Mm-hmm. In narrative games, or in a narrative game, this is a decision to bring about the end game. This is if you're doing this narratively.
Yeah,
without the
that's
mechanical
bad.
trigger,
Yes.
Yeah. It can be done by the GM, or it can be done by the players as a group, which that could be the way to do it. I bet
seen it
that's
both
how
ways.
a lot of people. I feel like a lot of people don't do it that way. They feel like a lot of people just let the game master handle it. But there are a lot of games, a lot of groups that probably would benefit, and a lot of situations that would benefit from letting the group decide.
I'll give you two examples. So one time I had this Amber game that, unbeknownst to all the players, we were playing the last session of the game.
Yeah.
It's unbeknownst to all but one of the players.
Uh-huh.
We were playing the last session of the game. And let's just say that went with mixed... I mean, some people cried. Some people didn't talk about it. It was kind of a mess. Like, there was no expectation setting, right? Like, it was a sudden revelation, like, oh, everything's destroyed, this game's now over. And left a lot hanging in the air. Whereas in my Tales from the Loop game, I remember telling the players, I was like, hey guys, based on how much story I have left, I think we have about 3 more sessions to go. Right? Like, I was like, I think we have about 3 more sessions to go. I think
you're setting an expectation.
Yep.
Right. Like, I think we're heading to the end game. Like, you're starting to put together the meta mystery for the season, that kind of thing.
It's interesting because people play differently when they know the end is coming.
Yes. Well, you start putting your eye towards how to resolve your stuff. And in that Amber game, it ended like oh God, what TV show was that? Was it The Sopranos? It was one of those ones where it just ends.
The Sopranos.
Yeah, and then everyone...
Then in the diner.
Right, everyone just loses it.
Yeah, people are like, what just happened?
Right, because what people don't... Because we're story-based creatures, right? So we like things to have a beginning, middle, and end. And when we just stop something...
We also prefer to have sometimes, at least in some stories, endings that are satisfying.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Because there's an implied thing that happens in that Sopranos ending.
Yes.
We have no idea what happens. It's just implied.
Correct.
And that can be rather frustrating as human beings.
That can be itchy.
Also, like, if a game ends and everybody didn't know it was going to happen, except for one person,
that's bad.
Then everybody is like, but my stuff.
But my stuff, my plans, my motivations, my NPCs, gone.
Now, to be fair, it's not like any of the people in that group had a conversation at the beginning of that game, like a session 0, that was like, so, do we get a chance to, like...
No. This was 1994. We didn't have safety. We didn't have session 0. We didn't have any of that. We
had like 6 people playing one game and one person playing a completely different game.
I could write probably a series of articles on everything I did wrong with that Amber game. And while it was still enjoyable, there were so many things as a GM I should not have done.
Mm-hmm. And since these are games, a lot of people have found ways to mechanically put ways to trigger end games.
Yeah. Sure. Because the trigger in a mechanical game, like there's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we
Yep.
it's a instead of like setting an expectation amongst the group, the game sets the expectation for you.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah, it's useful.
Yep.
I think it can be problematic at times, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
So when this happens, then the end game begins, and the end game could have its own set of rules, right? Like Ticket to Ride.
Yeah.
And Swords Without Master. We talked about them both already.
Yep, absolutely. Both have their own. Both have very specific rules that start to change the game.
Mm-hmm.
So in RPGs, the end game will also include wrapping up those narrative loose ends, right? Often, if you're doing it, I would say if you're doing it right, you're leaving that space to let. Not only are you wrapping up your stuff as a GM, but you're building in some space to let players kind of initiate things that they want to conclude.
Yeah. See, Endgame is interesting because it's really 3 parts, in my opinion.
Yeah, go ahead, break it down.
Endgame to me is the build up to the climax,
Sure.
the climax,
Yep.
and the denouement.
Yeah, I think that's. I think
That's
that
fair.
makes sense because up till that point, the phase that precedes it could go on forever.
Yeah, because you're in this constant try-fail loop.
Yeah, you could just forever. You can just keep putting more arcs and loops and whatever.
Yeah, and these things should be driving to your last try-fail loop.
Yeah.
Which after that last try-fail, you either succeed or it's over.
Yeah. So I agree. Like I think like that all gets packed into there.
I'm really trying to stay away from the idea of the 3-act structure. I think the 3-act structure is a perfectly wonderful thing for people to talk about,
Fine,
but it's not. I don't think it's actually the way that stories get told.
I mean, it's not the be all end all. Like it's a convenient shorthand for.
It's a convenient shorthand
Convenient
for what is
shorthand
a
is a
bunch
good
of
way to put it.
yeah, for what is a bunch of actual tri-fail cycles.
Tri-fail is actually the better. Tri-fail is actually the better term.
Yeah, if you really want an explanation of what I think storytelling is in the middle, like the beginning introduces everything, the middle of your story going into what the end game is a really good thing to talk about it, right? Like Endgame is probably the idea of the endgame is probably one of the best like finale things. Like, when we talk about third acts, really what we're talking about is the things that we just talked about.
Yeah.
But that middle piece, it's about tri-fail cycles and exploring the characters as you're moving the plot along through those tri-fail cycles.
Yeah, I think. I mean,
and the themes and the
right.
motifs of the story that are
right.
being
It's the perfect middle because it'll just persist forever until you do something about
Go
it.
read a comic book.
Right. Persist forever until somebody ends a comic.
They're almost in constant tri-fail cycles. Even when, that's the thing about, and even with the Avengers comic books, like the cosmic ones, we were talking about this last week, right? Like, even when you have those giant, what you would consider end-game situations for story arcs or whatever, like, then they just kind of go to the next one with more tri-fail cycles, exploring different ideas, themes, and motifs, which is kind of disjointing because you're like sort of starting a new.
Well, often they'll put like an issue or two that is kind of a cooldown.
Yeah.
Because what they're doing is they go and switch and do some like in-depth character stuff because the last couple beats were usually a climactic part of a comic book arc is heavy action.
Yeah.
So then they'll switch back out beat-wise and they'll go into, now Reed and Sue go away for vacation for a week, and like have some discussions, and Johnny and Ben are hanging around with the kids in the tower.
Yeah. They've often also done things where the first issue after the end of the big story arc, they'll start out with a couple of pages of normal everyday stuff or whatever, and then partway into that issue, they'll spring the next big thing on you. Now,
the reason I bring this up, and I wanted to talk about this, is because we can apply that kind of idea to role-playing games.
Absolutely.
Like if you have a campaign that you like to play on and on with the same characters, like you could have had your end game with a bunch of characters, and if some people want to keep playing those characters, that's a good way to move on. To your next story arc / campaign.
Yep. So cool. There's definitely some chat in the chat room I want to get to right now. So. Now that we've kind of just explored how endgames work, let's actually check in with the chat room and answer a few things. But before we jump over to the chat room, Chris, tell us about another show on the Misdirected Mark Network.
So the jazziest and coolest show on the network is called The Lounge. In fact, it starts with jazz every time and ends with jazz every time. Plus, it's actually in a lounge. Doc had it built. Doc, he goes and he finds the best, the brightest, and the most fun game designers, and he sits down to have a very interesting, fun, free-form, flowing chat with them.
Yeah.
You never know what kind of conversation is going to come up in the lounge.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, there should be an episode with me coming up.
What?
I know.
Doc
How
is
do I fit into that dynamic? I don't know.
Doc is amazingly easy to talk to. Like hanging out with Doc is.
Oh
just-
yeah, it was a great
just
time
Cool.
sitting and just conversing with him. And
I love how the show always starts because he doesn't actually like he has an intro where he talks a little bit about the person that's going to be on, but then it's just like you roll into the like when he starts the audio, it's a roll into the conversation because he doesn't actually like ever start the conversation with the people with like a question or anything like that.
No.
He just cuts in during the conversation somewhere.
yeah.
Yep.
Good times.
Cool.
Tell me about questions or comments in the chat room.
So Ange had one comment that it is occasionally okay to end a campaign on short notice, depending on the group's circumstances and where they are in the story, which is
Yeah, in fact, actually, it's even
Perfectly
better
fine.
if you do that, right?
Yeah.
So if like something happens and somebody has a life-changing event, like all of a sudden somebody gets a job in another state, and like
I
the
gotta
game,
move away.
the game, yeah, the campaign's not going to sustain itself. Quickly moving to an end game so that you can bring some sort of conclusion to the game is excellent because again, we as human story creatures love satisfying endings.
Yeah, I know we're talking about ending campaigns here, but also like this is good advice for ending story arcs.
Well, because ending a story arc could be the end of a campaign.
It's true.
Yep.
So, for instance, in this situation with somebody that has a life changing event, maybe everybody doesn't want to quit playing, but you want to give that character a send off.
So that's a very different kind of that's an end game for that character.
Correct.
Yeah,
And it
you
could be
wrap up something that is significant for that character,
Mhm.
and then after they're gone, the rest of the group continues on to a new adventure.
Yeah, I just like to point out that all of this stuff that we're talking about is kind of fractal.
There is a very
Sure.
fractal, right? Because it involves arcs, and we know that arcs are fractal.
Yep, and arcs can be character arcs or campaign or story,
Yep.
like meta arcs.
Yeah, I think it's important. Just as an aside, when something dramatic shakes up a game group, it's worth having the discussion about what to do and whether or not the campaign will persist in its current form, whether it'll pivot.
Yeah, how is this going to affect us?
I've lost campaigns because of this.
Yeah, that happened. Actually, it happened to all of us, and I mean, from it, we pivoted into something that turned out to be actually probably way bigger.
Yeah, I mean, we went from Numenera to the Airy Peaks to Dungeon
Right.
World.
Yeah.
But that happened to us. We lost a player in our Numenera game, and at first we thought it was temporary, so we were like, cool, we'll shelve it and go play something else. And then that temporary turned into permanent, and we were like, just keep playing Airy Peaks.
Yep.
So yeah, it's I think it's actually really important, but I think it is okay. Like it is okay to move a game into to move the game into an end game state so that you can get that satisfying conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you got to like time it. Like with Tony, we knew when Jess was due, and project manager Phil was like, well, we're not going to run the game up to the week Jess is due because
Probably do it like a month before.
yeah, pregnancies are tricky.
Yeah.
So we started I was building the game towards that end game for like a month or two. Like I kind of knew okay, these couple sessions are going to be the end game, and needed to kind of build into that space.
Yeah. Avi just dropped a funny comment. Sometimes after a big life-changing event, one of the hosts can't really continue, so you invite a new host and kill the fiction.
That's accurate.
To be clear, we left the fiction wheezing for a little while before we
the
put
fiction
it down.
was on life support for a bit before they finally pulled the plug.
But yes, eventually, yes, you kill the fiction.
Blake Ryan had a question from earlier on. In Star Trek: The Next Generation, in later seasons, they all got commander status. Is that a sign that they're going elsewhere and the show is wrapping up?
Yeah.
It's also a problem, right?
Yeah.
So it's a game that involved they addressed this midway with Riker in the Borg episodes, because they're like, you should be getting your own ship because that's why Shelby shows up.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, but by the time that show actually ended, he should have had his own command.
Oh yeah.
Picard should have been an admiral.
Yep.
But it's the thing about the series, and in this case, like a role-playing game, there's a thing where probably in the Star Trek game, there should be a triggered endpoint where when the people have to promote out.
If you have a rotating cast,
It's not as big a deal.
No, yeah, exactly. But if you have a cast and you let the same characters persist for way too long, then the story's more about them than about the ship.
Exactly.
But if you have a cast that is constantly rotating in and out,
Yes, then the show is about the ship. But the show was always about the characters.
Yeah.
So, everybody. I mean, you couldn't have promoted Picard out and kept Next Generation alive
But at some point, maybe you could have if Riker became the captain.
early on.
Yeah, like if you would have done 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And then there's actually a shift. Like, imagine Picard dies in that Borg situation.
Yeah, it was pretty early.
Yeah.
I mean, like if he had wanted out of the series,
that show could have persisted.
Yes.
Yep.
And then you've set a precedent, like characters can rotate in and out. Then imagine like Worf goes away and you get somebody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you'd already killed Tasha Yar early on.
Ugh,
I mean, there's a bunch of other things that go along with
yeah.
that.
terrible
It's
episode.
a terrible episode. But like, so the point that I'm bringing up is for your role-playing games. If you establish early on that you can rotate characters in and out, it's not as big of a deal.
So that's a session 0. So in your session 0, you have to say like, so if I'm running Star Trek, right? So my session 0 then is, okay, cool. Are we telling a story about the characters, or are we telling a story about the ship? Because if we're telling a story about the characters, then the end game for this is you're going to start to promote your way out of here, right? If we're telling a story about the ship, then let's all agree that when someone reaches promotion, we're going to cycle somebody out, we're going to promote somebody up and move somebody in.
Mhm. Whatever your trigger is then for
Yeah.
the cycling in and out.
Exactly, because that's a cool, like, both of those are very viable ways to run that game, but you should pick one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scum and Villainy, like we've been playing it. Like we've had 2 situations where characters have been taken out for sessions. We had to have new characters pop in.
And that's a game that tells you to do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right? So that game tells you, like, go make some more characters, go take one of the stock crew people you have and promote them into a character, that kind of thing.
Yeah, strangely enough, Scum and Villainy doesn't really have stock crew people
No?
as much. Like
It doesn't treat it that way the same way that
that Blades does.
that Blades in the
Right,
Dark
Blades
does.
assumes
a
that you
little
have like a
different.
criminal network. Like
Yeah.
there's people all over
Yeah.
the place. But
Interestingly enough, the fact that we had a character have to take time off because of overindulging their vice
right.
to remove stress, we brought in an alt character that I have had so much fun playing that
That you
I've
just
just been
plays
playing that character.
It's great.
Totally
instead of the other
legit.
one. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a little off topic, but
No,
Yeah.
it's okay. But that, you know,
But yeah, we probably can wrap back into the
yeah,
into the
absolutely.
segment.
is there anything else?
For now, we're good.
All right, so let's get back to talking about endgames. So let's talk about the play experience that they create. It's always very important. So it creates an expectation for the conclusion of the game. I think that's what it does. That's the whole
We
point
know
of
where,
them.
right?
Yeah.
It's just like you said before, right? There's a tonal shift. We know we're heading into the end
Yeah.
game.
Now, early role-playing games, they didn't do that because a lot of early role-playing games, they assume that you just play forever.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you see this from time to time, right? Like, I've been playing AD&D since the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, we're
Same
sixth
character,
generation,
same campaign.
sixth generation of
Yeah.
characters
Yeah,
in
the
kind
children
of.
of our
No,
children.
I guess I shouldn't say that because I think AD&D assumed you would eventually get a keep.
Yeah, but that wasn't an end game. That was just how to spend more gold.
Yeah, but once you had a keep, you had like a bunch of different sets of problems and things like that. But
Yeah.
then you could start playing the other characters.
If anything, the keep was so in AD&D. I think it was less clear as it was in the BX books. In the BX books, those were tiers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
essentially.
the companion level, like when you got to the companion box set, like you were supposed to get a keep and have land and stuff like
Uh-huh.
that, and
Yep.
it was a new tier of play, right? And then
Yeah.
there, like, and each box set represented another tier until ultimately you got the immortal set, and then you cursed everything about the path
Just
you were on.
killed
Yeah.
gods. It's fine.
Yeah, Immortals was not good.
But yeah. So the truth is, most of us don't play one game for the rest of our lives.
No.
Like,
No.
so we do actually need, like, either we end them, we either end them cleanly, or we're just gonna drop them or fade them out,
And more often than not, they fade out.
which happens a lot of
Yeah.
times,
That's
right?
because more and more games these days are putting in mechanics for it. They didn't have them before.
Well, I mean, fade out doesn't mean that. Fade out means like we didn't play last week, we're not playing the next week. Cool. Like you know what? I just got a new Kickstarter, and you want to play this instead?
Yeah.
That's the fade out, right?
That's
The
the
fade
fade out.
The fade out is it had no ending. Like you just stopped playing one day.
Yeah, because I think one of the reasons is because people can design that stuff into the games.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not even that. Like even if, like, for instance, you could fade out Scum and Villainy by just stop playing it.
Sure.
Like just like miss a few sessions,
I
miss
get-
a few sessions, and then be like, you know what, guys, we could finish that up, or we could start Band of Blades.
Yeah, I guess psychologically what I'm saying is that because we know that there's an end game that is coming, it makes us more.
If we know there's an end game coming,
Yeah.
right? Like now we have something to drive
Yeah,
towards.
and we know there's a mechanic that will trigger it.
Yes.
Like that's
Like-
also a thing we can drive towards.
Yeah, and it's
That's two layers. There's a mechanical which drives the psychological.
yeah, exactly. Right, we play towards the mechanics of the game.
Chris, you might want to turn yourself up a tad, I guess.
No, I'm a little quiet. Like an hour in.
Okay, so so cool. Talk more. Let's talk a little bit more about that expectation because I think that's really important, right? Knowing that there's an end game gives us that expectation,
Yeah, absolutely.
which I think is a whole lot of what we've been saying, right?
Mhm. So we want a beginning, a middle, and an end. All that good stuff. Is that where we're at?
Yeah. We do like them, right? We do
Yeah.
like beginning, middle, and end.
That's kind of how that goes. Even though, like I don't know. That's the thing. Like we find
Yeah.
more stories satisfying. We can bring them to conclusion.
There's
We talked
easy
about it
proof.
earlier.
There's easy proof of this in TV shows.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah,
like-
when
like
you
Lost.
cancel a TV show,
Or when you cancel a TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know,
if you cancel it before it's wrapped up, everybody's like,
right.
I actually won't watch them. I almost will wait until a season of TV finishes to
Right.
find out if they're going to cancel it. If I want to bother taking the time.
I
to
mean,
watch
in
it.
the old days, like
we didn't have that choice.
we didn't have that choice. Like for instance, one of my favorite TV shows got canned during the writer's strike. Do you remember the writer's strike like 10 years
I
ago?
don't want to talk about it.
Really?
I lost a whole bunch of good TV.
Me too. Did you
Yep.
watch Life?
Oh,
with
yeah.
Damon- with
It's
Damon-
so good.
That show was
So good.
amazing, and it had a huge meta arc that never got resolved.
Nope, no,
It hit the writers thing and just died, and Jay Leno took its spot, and I had bile in my mouth. I was so angry.
so angry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Life was such an amazing TV show.
yeah.
Okay. Cool. End games keep games from getting stale. Right? Like we talked about that middle that could just be an endless set of try-fail cycles.
Yeah.
There's a point where that can get kind of worn out.
Uh-huh.
Like depending on your game, like you might run through all the mechanics.
I mean, I can only watch so many episodes of Law and Order before I want to shoot somebody.
Yeah, that's fair. That's why I only watch them in snatches, and
I
then.
don't really ever want to shoot anybody.
But for instance, like I mean, this is always my thing with Savage Worlds. Like if I play Savage Worlds enough in a row, I'm like, oh, this game's samey, right? Samey is that word I always use.
Mhm.
Like it stops being like the mechanics stop being interesting to the game, right? So having an end game lets us know, right? There's a signpost out there that, hey, like if like before this gets stale, we can just end the game.
Mhm.
And in some games, playing without an endpoint would feel weird. Like if, like we mentioned this before, if Starcross only ended when the tower fell, what do you do? Like, what if you're really good at Jenga?
I mean, eventually it'll fall over.
I mean, eventually, but are you going to run out of time? You can't put that game away.
No.
Like, you can't stop and be like, quick, take a picture of the tower. We'll rebuild it
No,
next week.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
you just can't.
Right. So before it gets stale,
Unless you're going to give yourself your 8 hours to play or whatever.
right? So before it gets stale, you run into the turn limit. So if your tower's super solid and your moves have been super deft, man, then you hit the turn limit and you resolve the game.
Yeah, it's better to have something that is more fixed, I suppose.
Yeah, there's also a thing in Starcross, knowing that there's a turn limit because you can, just like in Dread, knock the tower over. Knowing that you're heading into the final scenes and the tower hasn't shown signs of falling over on its own. In a meta level, you can start making a decision like, I'm going to steer the narrative to knock this tower over. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to start driving, like, I know there's only 2 scenes left in this game. You know what? I'm going to turn it up and I'm going to raise the stakes. And then eventually, if that doesn't work,
Mhm.
I'm going to tap and knock this thing over.
Which
Or I'm going to raise the stakes and get the other person to do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
What do you want to do now?
Talk about length of game.
Sure. So when you set like a countdown or a count up,
Yep.
threshold, whatever, like that, you can adjust the length of play.
Mhm.
It's very useful. So for instance, like for the Queen of the Quiet Year, they have ways to adjust the end game by triggering the end game trigger by adjusting the size of the deck or where that card is in it.
Yeah.
That's actually how they do it.
Well, in the Quiet Year, it actually you take out some other cards as well
Oh, okay.
because you shrink the seasons.
That's
because
right,
the
there's
end game
4
only
seasons.
sits in that one section,
Yep.
but it tells you to take out. I think it's the 10. I forget what it's the 2 highest cards from every season.
Yeah,
so
because they're all marked like a regular card deck. So
Yeah.
Jack,
So you get the
ace, queen,
season
jack.
smaller, and then the card is in there.
Yeah, you can also like speed up games by taking or shortening things too, like
Yep.
Swords Without Master, like the number of motifs.
Yeah, we've done that. Like we've played 2 motif games
Mhm.
where we're like, yeah, this is good enough.
Yeah, I would be more interested. You could also like shorten the number of motifs per card, but I would just
Shorten the
cut a
total number of
out,
motif.
yeah.
Yep, I agree.
So why don't you tell me some of your best tips then for leveraging these ideas in your game?
Funny, I was going to ask you, what are some of your best tips for leveraging the games? Because it's in my color.
I know.
You're just all over the place now.
I'm
Yeah.
a little all over the place. This
Some of,
conversation's been kind of meandering.
yeah, some of them. All right. Well, some of my best tips for leveraging end games. I think that I think the meta discussion is really good. Like I'm not a fan of surprising people with the end game. I think that as a group discussion, right, GM and players, I think it's perfectly fine to start saying like, hey, we've been playing this game for a while. I'm thinking we're in a place where we might get ready to start wrapping up this game. Are you guys feeling that as well? Right?
Yeah.
And then if people are like, yeah, I think I am, like, okay, cool. I'm going to start writing the sessions that are going to lead us into the end game.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of games with leveling systems, and then having like those end games coincide with either right before the power levels have jumped, or right after the power levels have jumped.
Sure.
I mean, D&D is a classic for that, but like other games too. Like there's the tier system in Numenera. Like, all right, we're all at tier 3. We just got there. Let's
wrap this bad boy
We
up.
know we're gonna wrap. I'm gonna like we're in the middle
Yeah.
of tier 2. I'm like, once we get to tier 3, we're gonna initiate endgame.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, like the Genesis system, when you accumulate a number of points as characters, like, well, we're gonna go to the end game because you're all of a certain power at this point.
Savage Worlds.
Yep. As soon as you hit a
What is it? Veteran or
whatever
those are.
Yeah, the ranking is
Yeah.
the rank system.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
they're. I mean, I think those are. I think they're great, and I think they're good for another reason, which is depending on the tone of your game. When with a lot of those levels, especially tiering,
Mhm.
when you move into the next tier, the abilities of the character may change the tone of the game.
Yeah.
Like if I'm
Yeah,
trying to have
absolutely.
a gritty what is it, sewer punk like sewer crawl game, crossing over level 10 like starts to now change. Like it's not going to be as gritty anymore going through the sewer.
Really crossing over level 4.
Yeah, depending. I mean, maybe I'm fighting like one big bad thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, like those tier crossings may change the tone of the game. We talked about that with scale, right? Like the scale of the game changes.
Sewer punk.
Yeah, if you're running
Super
around and
fun,
your mage all of a sudden gets fireball.
Would you put a tag down or a ping for the after show to talk about sewer punk?
Sewer punk.
Yeah,
I need to explore this idea of what constitutes sewer punk a little bit.
yeah. You
more.
just exist under the city fighting like trash and
Sure,
stuff.
right? But
Fighting
what's the
trash.
punk part of that?
Well, you're just like you have to
I said
survive.
save it for later.
Okay, right. Cool. I just literally made it up a couple
I
weeks
know.
ago.
That's why I want to talk about.
Okay,
it.
I'm
cool.
actually kind of fond of having the discussion before you start in the session 0
Mhm.
of where you want to go with the game and setting an expectation for like a targeted play experience. Like, hey, we're going to pick up this game and we're going to play an arc that's probably going to go from maybe this number of sessions to this number of sessions and come out right out of the gate saying, hey, this is what we're going to shoot for and this is the kind of play experience that we're going to go after.
Mhm.
I think that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, no, I think
I
that's,
agree.
I think that's perfectly fine. I knew for Tales from the Loop, I wanted a big meta arc. I didn't at session 0 know what the meta arc was because it wasn't until we made characters and it was Glenn's character's background. It was a thing on the sheet that was like, your mom has quote vanished, and I was like, oh, like okay. And then it took me like another week or two when I had to like. It took me a week or two of brainstorming to figure out like what cool thing could I do about Glenn's mom, Marianne's mom vanishing, and then what could I like? How could I turn that into a mystery?
Mhm.
And eventually came up with this like really weird ass.
Yeah, you did a nice job with that. That was a great one.
Thank you. I was pretty happy with that one too. So yeah,
Do you want to ask me the next question?
I really, yeah. Let's just throw color coding out the window tonight.
Well, I was offering it to you. So
no, thank you. What kind of problems do endgames cause?
Well, Bob, do you want to go first?
Wow.
Well, Chris.
Wow.
I like your answer a lot, so why don't you just...
Sure. What? What? Why are you shaking your head at me?
We're like all
You're not having fun?
I'm just getting
I'm having a good old time. Here we go. You
down
could have this situation where the mechanics of the game make it feel like the story you were telling ends abruptly. Like,
And
that
that's
is a
no
problem.
That happens in For the Queen. If you're not prepared for, you weren't prepared for
I
it.
was
Like, we
not.
all had played it before.
Yeah.
But
I was like, what just happened?
right, we're like, yeah, game's
mean
done.
it's over?
Yeah, we're like high-fiving each other. You're like,
I'm like,
but even if you know what's going to happen, there's no more rules for what to do after answering that question. Does your person live or not? A lot of people say it doesn't matter. Like, all it really matters is your relationship with the queen. But after you have played for a while, like, you have some vested interest in this character. Did you live? Did you run away? Like,
did I kill her?
Right? Like,
did I die?
Yeah, we don't.
At her hands?
Right, we don't know, right? So
no, we really don't. That's part of the point, I would imagine, right?
Yep. I would say one of the problems that endgames cause in narrative endgames is pacing. So if you are under some sort of constraint, like semesters coming up and your friends are all going back to school, or somebody's about to have a baby, timing your endgame it takes a lot of skill. Like, if you have to have a pretty good judge of, like, well, this is how much material we move through in a game. Like, and sometimes you get into this, like, rushed, and it happened to us, I think, happened to us once or twice in our Masks game as we were leading up to the end of our thing, where we played no breaks. We played straight through for like 3.5 hours, played right to the moment everybody had to leave, like, for each session.
Yeah.
We were just like I was, because basically I was like, we have to get to, like, this part of the story so that there's only this much story, so that I can hit 6 weeks from now, 3 sessions, I can land on the climax of the game.
Now, the good part is that we were all invested, and, we didn't, like, to the best of my recollection, we didn't stop partway through where we normally would take a break and say, do we want to keep going? And we just played. And then we're like, oh, it's almost 10 o'clock.
Everybody was dialed in.
Yeah,
and
we were just in. So.
We were in and we were going.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that landing a narrative endgame, it's not a problem. It requires a level of skill. And if you are new to gaming and your endgame has a time constraint, that can be very stressful.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. Like, the pieces and the parts we already mentioned them once. Let's mention them again. There's the lead up.
The lead up, the climactic event.
The climactic event, and the denouement.
And the denouement.
So, if you have multiple characters, and they all have their own story arcs.
Yep.
Plus you have the overarching meta arc, which is probably tied into someone's story arc.
Sure.
You have to figure out
the group. Yeah.
Or the group story arc. You have to figure out a way just to tie those things into each other. So that's the process, but that can be tricky.
It can be tricky if it's tricky if you don't understand, if you don't have a good feel for how to estimate how much material your game can move through, like your group can move through. Like, if you are like, because if you're like, cool, all I got to do is in this next 4 hours is run this 18th level battle and still have 3 hours.
Well, you failed at that point.
Right.
So, like, understanding, I mean, there's a lot of things to it. Like, you have to understand your game.
Yeah.
You have to understand how long it takes.
Yep.
Then you have to understand what are the actual most important things that you need to get through when you're time constrained.
Right.
And then those are the things that you focus on. And if you know that, then you can be like, well, I got 4 plot points that I can hit. Right. So I'm going to figure out how to focus on these 4 for that period of time.
Yeah, and this is the part where, as a younger GM,
these
are tricky.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't have a time constraint and it's like, cool, I'm going to do the end game, we're just going to play sessions until the end game's over, no problem.
Yeah.
But like, for instance, when I did the L Hall Demon King, that last fight was like a 17th level 3x, because the Iron Heroes, right?
Yeah.
3x battle.
That's a giant time consuming fight.
The only thing we did that session was that fight. That session started with, I put the players on the battle mat, and it ended when the Demon King died. And then we did a whole other 4-hour session after that for the denouement.
Yeah, my 4th edition D&D game that I ran for 50 sessions. The last encounters was one was a 3-dimensional encounter where people were flipping around.
Yep.
And whatnot. And this is after they've been in this castle for 10 sessions.
Right.
Fighting basically a war. And then the last one was on the top of this roof with built diorama sets and things like that, right? On the entire table.
Yeah.
Right? It was 5 hours of play for those 2 encounters.
Yeah. So definitely understanding what you can move through.
Those encounters were both also huge, and the second one was very dynamic and had multiple phases to it and things like that.
Exactly. I mean, when you've built a seriously meaty combat, right? So I mean those, and that's not that, and that doesn't mean that end games are bad, right? The problem is that it can be a little stressful on the GM, or you wind up rushing certain parts of the game. Like maybe you don't get enough time. You get to the climactic battle, but you don't have enough time in the remaining of the session or sessions after to do a satisfying denouement, and you kind of do a rushed denouement.
That's why if you know you're going to have someone. So I mean, the reason I brought up the thing before, about, when we were talking about here's how you do it, here's the plan that you should at least come in with, because you said it's hard for younger or less experienced game masters. Is because there's a plan that you can take to it. There are some things that you need to understand and know. But once you understand and know those things, figure them out and then initiate your plan. What are your most important plot points? How long do you think they're going to take?
Yeah.
Is it going to take you 1 session, 2 sessions, 3 sessions based on those estimates? If so, maybe you make yourself a little note next to it, I'm pretty sure it's going to take me this long. Because then if it doesn't take you that long, or it takes you longer, then you're well, I better cut something else out.
Yeah. It's I mean, the good part is it's a learned skill.
Or shift it, right? Into some other kind of encounter. I really wanted to have this fight here, but I want to change to something that's going to take less time.
Yeah, I mean, you might plan for that. You might know, I can drop this. I can drop these 2 encounters and move right over to this encounter, right, and save myself some time. There's a clock management, right? When we talk about in Pandas, we talk about the 8 skills that a GM has to have. So at least at some point, one of those 8 skills is clock management, right? And it's just understanding how your game group moves.
Yeah, pacing is a thing.
Pacing is a thing. It's a thing in a lot of things, actually, as it turns out.
You want to do this next question?
Yeah.
Since it's in black.
Sure.
I'm going to do it.
Bob, you do it. Do it.
Yeah, do it.
It's Anarchy Night
There
tonight.
you go. What kinds of hacks or designs can we do with endgames?
Yeah.
So I like timers. They're great.
Timers are awesome.
The endgame's going to start regardless of how much the characters have accomplished. And those timers have to be for the bad guys, in my opinion. The opposition, the adversaries, because to me that makes the adversaries feel like they're going to be doing stuff regardless of what the characters do.
Yeah.
I love that. That's one of my favorites. Those are one of my favorite hacks. And those timers have mechanical triggers.
I'm really experimenting with ways to make games end. So one of the things that's on my mind about the Ditch Lilies is that you come to this town and you are trying to solve their problems. I don't want there to be an infinite amount of time to solve the problem. Otherwise you'll just otherwise you'll always find a way to solve the problem. I want the game to sometimes be you got only a partial success in saving something in the town, and you get on the bus a little bittersweet.
It's a real fun board game-esque story game. Right?
Yeah. So I was thinking about things like Damn the Man, right? Damn the Man has a fixed number of turns. And I know that in the Ditch Lilies, there is a moment, which is the gig, which might be the climax of the game. And I'm just this is one of those things I'm so happy that I'm going out to Denver for a couple days for, is to actually clear our schedules, and Sunday I can just sit and really dig into Ditch Lily stuff. But on my list of things that I want to talk to her about is how my feel is we should make this game finite, because otherwise, and this is something we know from kind of looking at some of the numbers, over time you can persist and win this game. And I don't want you to always win. So I think there's a good story in Bittersweet.
Yeah, whatever your timer is, opposition track is. That's what you
Well, I
need to
have
figure
2
out.
opposition tracks, but even those could like I still like the idea of 2 opposition tracks and possibly a scene budget.
I'm just talking about for whatever game you're playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other thing too is that when you look at all of these different methods of doing your end game, the clocks and the all the different things that we've talked about, you can arrange things in different ways for different games to get a particular play experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is fascinating. You know, if you take something and you're like, right now, looking at it, the end game is like this, but if we switch it and go here, the whole play experience changes, and it gives you a different feel. And I think that's just very cool.
I need an example.
Well,
put Bob on the spot.
like his you know, sometimes you don't win.
Mhm.
The bittersweet experience. Like if you specifically crank things down where that you've got a time limit and other things in that system for the Ditch Lilies game, that you're going to have the potential where you're going to walk out of that town and you save that couple's relationship, but they lost the rec center in the town. Okay, that's not great. But if you don't have those pieces in place, the game goes further. Like, we saved everything and we walk out heroes. That's a completely different play experience.
Well, it's also shifted to being a timer, not necessarily to save the rec center, but then a choice where either do you not save the rec center or do you sacrifice
you
your
end up with
relationship.
a choice point, a hard choice where you're like, which one do we do?
That also would change the play experience because you have
Uh-huh.
to actually make that choice at the end instead of just having the thing happen through play.
Right.
Yeah.
But if right, in its current state, if you can just keep making rolls and keep generating successes,
Yeah, then
Eventually, you're gonna
you're
do
just going to win.
Right.
And I'm not saying that's how like a difference of the design of the ditch.
Oh, no,
You
no.
just use the Ditch Lilies game, so I was like, well,
yeah, no, that's
the
fine.
idea was how do you change the mechanic to
Right. How do you
provide a different play experience?
Yeah.
So that was where I was coming from.
exactly? Yeah, I feel like from looking at the numbers, the clocks, and things like that, that I think, and even the story, right? You're coming into town to play a gig.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like you need to leave town to go play the next gig.
Uh-huh.
That should somehow
Really,
that should be reflected in the mechanics
The
of
gig
the
should be
game.
the last thing that happens based on that because you're coming in to play the gig and then you're leaving.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like, or a set of scenes after
Yeah,
the
it's
gig.
the denouement.
The denouement.
Yeah. I
Rise
think
in big bad
I
action.
think we triggered the end game for the show.
Yeah, well, at least the end game for the segment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Check in with chat room.
Yeah. Let's go to the chat room one more time.
Let's
I
see
don't know if
here.
they said anything. I was looking.
Yeah, they've been raptly.
I saw something about dairy and problematic.
There's some interest in sewer punk.
Dairy, yeah.
Sewer punk right there. Wow.
Yeah, we're gonna have some sewer punk conversation in
Yep.
in the after show. That's for sure.
I love
Talk about gelatinous cubes and stuff.
I mean,
yeah.
fighting trash.
trash and gelatinous cubes.
Trash mobs.
Shambling mounds.
Trash mobs.
Shambling mounds.
Yeah,
Ateliers.
Blake Ryan likes storms and fronts in PBTA to help with pacing,
Mhm.
because then it makes you think about who's doing what, why, and where.
Yes,
where it's going.
they're great
So,
tools
yeah.
for keeping you on pace, and also great tools for increasing the tension for the characters that are playing. They're better when you actually like the clocks in Apocalypse World. In some ways, are more effective than the fronts, the dooms and portents, I should say, in Dungeon World, because those are just lists.
Mhm.
You don't have to mark them off. You just are they're supposed to like say that they just show up, but there's no like onus necessarily on the characters to know mechanically what's going on, because there's no mechanic for it really.
Sure.
Except that when you get to the bottom of that list, then something happens. Assuming you get to the bottom of that list.
Yeah.
It's cool when you decide to attach some sort of mechanical implication to those things, though.
I mean, I think it's a design thing that you and I, it's a thing I certainly picked up from you, and it's certainly a thing I've incorporated into my own design aesthetic. Is a thing is interesting, but show me the mechanic that goes with it.
And it doesn't need to be everything, but the things that are important.
Well, yeah. Like, I mean, like, for instance, in the Ditch Lilies, like, you're coming to town and then you're leaving to go play another gig.
Mhm.
There needs to be something mechanical about that. Like, there needs to be something that says it's time to go.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
All right.
Good stuff. Did we do a good job on Endgame? I feel like we did.
I feel like it was fun.
Avi the Jackal would like us to give a shout out
To?
to a podcast by Judd Carlman called Daydreaming About Dragons. It's an RPG podcast.
Yeah, sure.
Sweet.
Go listen to Daydreaming About
I
Dragons.
have not listened to it.
I will tomorrow.
There you go. Awesome.
I'm just over the top of people. Whatever. It doesn't matter.
Who needs rules?
But that, I mean, that
Rules are for suckers.
pacing, man. No pacing here whatsoever.
Maybe that's next week's topic.
No timing here whatsoever.
Is next week's topic all about pacing?
No, we're going to talk about. I said what we should talk about.
Was I
which is-
sleeping?
What did you?
I might have been sleeping.
I don't remember.
You don't remember?
It was like 15 minutes.
You're
No,
supposed
it
to
was 2
write
hours
it
ago.
down. It was like
Is it sewer punk?
Oh,
Is
I
it
was
sewer
supposed to
punk?
write it down?
no.
I don't remember that.
Well, now.
We're going to talk about something next week. But anyways, let's talk about our topic for chatter that was in the forums this past week.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So I asked people, what was your best leading question from our leading questions episode?
Oh, that's excellent.
And I said we would say some of them out loud. We don't have to say all of them, but say some of them out loud and actually answer them as if we were characters.
Sure.
So why don't we all pick one, and I'll pick the first one. This is from the chief himself, Rob Aberzato. What happened to the other half of that amulet?
Sure. That's great.
So what happened to the other half of that amulet?
I gave it away to a demon to secure a favor.
Oh, that's terrible.
There you go.
Can I ask you a follow-up?
Sure.
What favor did you really need that badly to give the demon the other half of this really powerful amulet?
I got caught cheating in a gambling den, and I got thrown into the basement where they were going to come and finish me off. And they don't kill you. They remove a few body parts and leave you as like a living reminder. And there was no way I could get out on my own. So I summoned the demon and made a pact that I would give it half of the amulet.
Okay. Thanks for dooming the world.
There you go. Nice
What
job.
what can I say? It was a bad run of cards.
Which one did you want to pick for either me or Bob?
Let's see.
There's a number of them, man.
I know. I'm looking. I hadn't read them all through. You recognize one of the bounty hunters. How do you know them?
I recognize one of the. Oh. I mean, so the easy one is that's my sister.
Yeah, I was gonna go there.
Cool. Follow-up question is does your sister know that the person she's following is one of your that she's tracking is one of your aliases?
No, she's just as surprised as I am. Also, I didn't know that she was a bounty hunter.
This is an awkward family moment right now.
So Alicia the Red is her alias, and I had no idea. And she's rather famous. And it's been rather
quite
awkward.
terrifying, right?
Terrifying and awkward.
Yes.
Yes. Thanksgiving's gonna be weird this year.
Bob, did you want to ask us one of them?
Sure, absolutely. I kind of like Emmett's question. Pirates arrogantly walk in your door. Are you expecting them, or are you grabbing a weapon?
Which one? Who are you asking?
Phil.
Both. I'm grabbing the weapon because I am expecting them, and they're pirates. So, I don't want to look weak. I want to be leveling my blaster at them as they're walking in the door, so they know I mean business.
Nice. All right, so that was there's a new topic for chatter out this week.
Yeah, what is it?
What did we talk about last week?
Never mind.
Scale?
Oh yeah, no, it wasn't scale.
No.
It wasn't scale. It was
Introductions.
Introduction.
So I asked people what their favorite introduction was, like in a game that they've played. Because I was curious.
Oh, I definitely have one for that. Save it for next week.
I actually put mine as the Larry Peaks one when I just dropped you in a cavern with that was way
when
too.
I busted through a Cyclops.
Yeah, that.
That's how I knew that character was going to be amazing.
Yeah, so get in on the topic for chatter. It's in the forums.
I'm gonna have to.
Fabulous forums.
I got to go mark that one so that I get prompted.
So let's talk about anything else now.
A few conversation topics.
Yeah, we got time.
Well, I'm going to Denver
You are.
Thursday.
Yes.
I'm excited. It'll be fun. I'm gonna work on some Ditch Lily stuff. That'll be cool. In fact, Senda's never played the one system, so I was like, cool. I'm gonna run you through a little something.
Nice.
Cool.
What about you, Bob?
So I finally finished Stranger Things season 3.
Oh, I'm taking it on the plane with me.
Started on season 2 of Runaways. So I'm catching up on some of my TV. Stranger Things season 3 was good, but We're born to pick with the Duffer Brothers. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay.
No spoilers.
So, one of my roommates got the Warehouse 13 board game.
Oh yeah.
It's actually pretty great. If you've ever watched Warehouse 13, then you know what that show is about. It's about a warehouse full of artifacts, and they can cause potentially tons of trouble, so they try to like grab them all and put them away. That's the show. The board game uses all the characters. It's an officially licensed game. Oh, that was a lot of buzzing from a phone. It's the best way I can describe it in the shortest amount of time is that there is a bunch of clues that are on these dice that you have rolled. Some of them are on the artifact, some of them are on the just out there. You're trying to, in the first phase, collect as many clues as possible, and every turn some of them go away and problems arise. So you have these dice, and then the second phase is you find out what the artifact actually is because you've done the investigation trying to acquire it. And you do that by taking the dice that you've accumulated, rolling them, and trying to, while nobody knows what they're putting under these little hide away things. You roll the dice, you put them, pick one, you put it under this, it looks like a warehouse, the die fits under it, and you all reveal at the same time, but you can't tell each other what you're putting under there. Because there's possibly a traitor amidst your misters.
There you go.
Yeah, there's a traitor in the game too, so they could be trying to like make things bad for the whole situation also. And if you can get enough of these dice on the board that match the icons of the artifact, you can then bag the artifact. And you're trying to do that 3 times before the adversary or the traitor gets 3 artifacts. And it's really cleverly designed to feel like the TV show. And I think I've watched all Warehouse 13 all the way through once. I know Bridget has watched it all the way. That's my roommate. Has watched it all the way through like 3 times. So it's like
Cool.
one of her favorite television shows. It's really good. Really, really, really good stuff.
Yeah.
Want to talk about anything else?
Yeah, I've been playing more Minecraft.
Yeah.
I'm definitely in the late phase of Minecraft, although I'm going to start a whole new tech pack in the game. I'm going to start Botania. I've been watching a couple of videos on it. It's super interesting. And part of me is like, oh, I should just do pure Botania. And part of me is like, nah, just combine it with what you know already from the other mods. But I might do it like in 2 phases. Like I might do it pure and then come back and like then merge it in.
Mm-hmm.
And as for late game, like yeah, so there's this thing, right? Like we can talk about this because Minecraft's a game, right? Minecraft has no end game.
We can literally talk about whatever we want.
No, but I'm saying like from a game discussion point of view, Minecraft is a sandbox game that has no end.
It's true.
There is a place called the end, and there's a dragon in the end that you kill, but the game doesn't stop. Like you kill the dragon.
You just tool around.
We
and do
killed the
whatever hell you
dragon
want.
like the second week we were in the game.
It's just a open sandbox build stuff thing.
Yep.
Yeah, so there's a thing where and there's nothing defined about this. Like we talk about it on the server as early game, mid game, and late game, but it has to do with your ability to amass resources.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say I'm in the late game, it means that like my ability to amass resources is exceeding my ability to spend resources.
Yeah. By the way, you're talking like MMO talk right
Yeah.
now. Because you can play all the end game content of
Right.
an MMO, but it's not the game doesn't end. Like you can
Yeah.
just keep playing the end game
Mhm.
content
Yeah.
over and over again, or
But-
do other things.
And there is no end game content, right? So like we just like right now I'm just building bigger and bigger things because I'm past survival.
yeah.
Like Jerry's like now officially in mid game. Like Jerry's no longer
Just trying to survive.
just trying to survive.
I mean, you essentially play that game until you get bored of it, then you start over.
Yeah.
And you
I
add
just
new
do it
mod packs and
again.
things like that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, we added a few. Like I think we have a few new mod packs lined up for the next iteration.
Minecraft is, aside from being that survival thing that is at the beginning, it's a creative space game.
Yeah, which is kind of the like for me. I got to a point where I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to learn this Botania thing, but I'm not going to do it in my current base. Like I went and built a completely separate base in a separate location that took me like 2 weeks to build, so that I had a clear like workspace to work in, so I could try it out.
Yeah.
But I only did that because I was like in like end game and was like, I totally have the resources to like throw all this together. Like I can totally build a whole other base from scratch.
Sure.
So I do dig it. I mean, I still dig it. Like to me, there's still nothing more relaxing. I enjoy doing it, and yeah, and when we've kind of stretched out this one, I have another mod pack from a YouTube series that I watched. Like the guy did a whole series, and he made a mod. He played a mod pack that he made, and then made it available on Twitch.
Oh, nice.
So if I want to, if I want to try it, I can tinker with that as well. But I like playing with these guys.
Yeah.
Where have you been?
I have been
Sleeping?
getting other stuff done. Interestingly.
All right,
Yeah.
fine. Jerry and I are on there.
Yeah, I need to get back into a rhythm.
I miss Schmitty. I haven't seen Weregator in a while. Like, I kind of miss everybody. Like,
Yeah.
I'll be gone for a couple days, but like when I come back, like, miss you guys.
Yeah.
Did you hear how sad he sounds, everybody? He's like,
The mumble, like even when people aren't playing, like
We were
the
having a real
mumble's
good
really
time with the
fun.
mumble
Like
chat, yeah.
the mumble's a lot of fun. Like everybody just gets on there and chats with each other. Like, miss everybody.
Yeah.
We played Scum and Villainy last week.
We did.
Nice.
Man, there's a thing about the job. When you're in the job, like, we ran an extra long, that lasted 2 sessions job.
Oof. A lot of stress.
It's a lot of stress.
Mhm.
But I didn't understand exactly how that all worked. But I take it pretty easy on them because we're playing it like Cowboy Bebop.
Sure.
So it's not about applying harsh consequences a lot of the time and things like that. Although we had some people get pretty messed up.
Yep.
Two of the characters got stressed out.
Yep.
Yeah, 2 of the characters got stressed out.
Which is tough. They're out of the narrative when that happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's that was a thing. After the play was done, one of the characters admitted they were pushing to get themselves stressed out because they're going to be running it. They wanted to see how hard they could push before they got stressed out.
Interesting.
One of the characters was damaged pretty badly. I'm also not being as harsh with the harm when it's assessed, because apparently when you get assessed harm in that game, you're supposed to, if you decide to use your fortitude, your resistance roll, it'll reduce the stress by 1 level. I think that's actually what the rule states. I always let it get reduced by 2 because we were playing it in Cowboy Bebop mode, where you're just super cool.
Yeah.
So if you reduce a stress 3 hit, like you're gonna take a 3 stress thing, a 3 harm thing, it'll take it down to a 1 harm.
Yeah.
Instead of a 2 harm.
Yeah.
Because the 2 harm is rough, as Weregator found out. Because if
Yeah.
you lose a die,
Yeah.
Yep.
you are far less effective than
It's not good.
No, it's bad. Actually, it's very bad.
Yep.
Yeah, a long job has consequences because your downtime, you have to roll to recover stress, and if you roll shitty, like you're heading into the next job like nearly maxed out.
On the bright side, if you get all the way stressed out, you just get all your stress back.
Yeah.
You get trauma,
you take a trauma.
Yeah. Which the traumas in that game don't really affect you that badly.
They don't actually affect you in Blades either, unless you choose to let them affect you.
They're just another methodology for experience
But
points.
Once you take enough traumas, you're out.
You're out of the game.
Yeah.
The thing that you do get a lot from having a longer job, though, is experience points.
Yes, because more times you roll.
Yes.
By the way, was it Gator who tried to burn themselves out?
No, it was Drew.
Oh, interesting.
Because Drew's going to be running.
Interesting, because Gator's the kind of person who often is like, hey, let me see how far I can push the limits of this game.
Gator's the one that had the 2 harm and was rolling with 1 less die.
Oof.
He was like, oh, this is brutal. Like,
Yeah.
He really wanted to fix himself after that.
Yep.
And luckily, the ship's got a doctor.
Yep.
So that
And my
helps a lot.
doctor now has 2 traumas.
Yeah.
So he's going to be a little jacked up.
But for Forge in the Dark players, longer jobs are tougher.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are playing it on. I am playing it on anime Cowboy Bebop mode. Like, it is.
Well, and that's the thing that you get to
decide as the game master.
Right, because that's how you get to decide whether something is how potent it is, how risky it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also how damaging it can be. There's like a third axis that people don't really talk about that much.
Well,
Like,
because
what
assigned damage is
because you can assign the stakes before the roll occurs.
yes.
Because there's effect, there's position, and then there's that other one, which is the harm thing, which is sort of assigning stakes. Like, and you can utilize that if you want to. It's very fascinating. It's very interesting. That's all I have to say about Scum and Villainy. I suppose we can move on, so we can go to the after show. Are you all good? Anybody else want to say anything?
No, but I'm just thinking because Rob's talking about Band of Blades as being like what he wanted for an XCOM game. I could also see Band of Blades adapting it to being the underground game that I've always wanted. Like, there's some modding into that.
By the way, Rob, we're going to be playing Band of Blades next online. So, I know you're not like a huge online gamer person usually. So, but if you want to play with us, we're going to play it.
Yep.
It's probably not going to be for a few months, but, there you go.
Yep.
All right. Let us move on to Patreon shoutouts because, it's that time of the show.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a bumper for that or anything. You want to make one up since we're in anarchy mode?
Patreon shout out.
Yeah, that's exactly. There we go.
That's not where I was going
That's
with it.
the kind of show we've been doing tonight, kids.
Good
So let's just
job.
roll with it.
The old school DM, Sean Merwin, the Mad Wizard, Troy Sandlin, Will Doyle, Zach Goins, Chris Constantine, Cindy Moore, Eric Mengi, Eric Simon from Forehand Games, Miko Froelich, Andrew Dempsey, Avi Waxberg, Brett.
What? Oh, I wasn't looking at the list. Is it Chris Steele?
Yeah,
Yes.
anytime I point at you,
Yeah.
you know what it is.
Yes.
Let me try that again.
Chris Steele.
Thank you. Curtis Y. Takahashi, Daniel Thomas, Dennis Malloy, Evil Ridge, J. David Chrisman, JT Evans, and Jen Pixelscapes Gagney.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you're free on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. the Queen's time, come join us live on Twitch, where you can chat with other listeners in the awesome Chat Room for Life and ask us questions. If you cannot make the live show, check out our podcast each week, wherever you get your podcasts, and take a listen to some of the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, such as Down with D&D, Bone, Stone, and Obsidian, Pandas Talking Games, Cypher Speak with Darcy and Troy, The Gnome Cast, the Wednesday evening podcast All-Stars, Zhang Hu Hustle, She's a Super Geek, and Bonus Experience. You can and should also check out our sibling podcast, Tabletop Bellhop, The Knights of the Night, and the always amazing Gaming and BS.
Then leave us some feedback. You can reach us directly at mmp@misdirectedmark.com, our amazing, lovely, wonderful, shiny, brilliant Facebook group.
Ding.
And Twitter. I am the Light 101. He is DNA Phil. Over there is Robert M. Everson, and you can get the network and the show at Misdirected Mark, which is monitored all the time.
If you like what we do here and on other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, you can support our Patreon campaigns. MMP, Down with D&D, and Pandas Talking Games at patreon.com/MMP. She's a Super Geek is at patreon.com/SassGeek. Shanghu Hustle at patreon.com/Shanghu Hustle. And last, but certainly not least, Bonus Experience is at patreon.com/Bonus Experience. Patrons of Misdirected Mark, Down with D&D, Pandas Talking Games get access to the after show, pre-production show notes, musical parodies, the Pandas Talking Games bonus outtakes, and other special releases.
We missed a few things real quick. Then you can do that, Bob. There are forums. You should go to the forums.
Forums.
Forums.misdirectedmark.com.
Yes. This has been a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. Mic drop.
We out!